I hope you're doing okay. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Welcome to my first video. I'm Roxy, and I'm going to tell you about my plans for this channel, as well as my theory as to why we suck at art. Firstly, my desires. So, I'd really like to do videos. No, I am going to do videos about art and its theory, its process, its history, in a way that's specific but also lends itself to like more than one worldview. That's important to me because I too am an artist seeking answers on YouTube. And I find that, like, although very well intentioned, a lot of people and institutions and books make art out to be magic when it's really not. Like, there's a logic to it that can be learned, and they say it's like, or we get the impression that it's a hobby for the rich and a career for the poor, and somehow we get the impression that like only the Northern Renaissance stuff is like the shit, when in actuality art is a beautiful like expression. It's a tool to be used. It's a reflection of a culture like trapped in, no, not trapped. It's like a reflection of a culture that's been like preserved in time, frozen in time. And it's incredible. But you'll probably be like, Roxy, you just said art wasn't magic, and here you are like sprinkling fairy dust poetry on the cool things about art. And to that I will say, you're right. You're right. But you also wrong. Because art is something that can be magical. It can really like transform the way we think and move us. But I think there's a logical, learnable place to start from. Now, as amazing as art is, I also recognize the fact that it feels so unattainable and so hard to get to, so hard to learn. Somehow this like feels harder than anything to feel like we can be good at. And so before I even start with fun stuff, I want to make a video about why we suck at art. Because we don't suck, we just have a lot of ideas that I think need to be explained and broken down. And if we're ever gonna get to the fun stuff, we have to like look at those, so we don't stop ourselves short. So my theory is going to use an analogy, which is that art is like sports. You're gonna have to bear with me. The reason I like to compare the two is because in both, no one starts off as a star. We all like start as scrawny little things that don't know what they're doing. We all have to train the eyes to see like, okay, in this defined space where things are changing all the time, I have to make decisions. I have to analyze what's happening. We have to build the muscles to like use our tools effectively. We learn different techniques to you know, make the most of our tools. And we learn from masters. We learn how to like watch our favorite people and like do what they do. And as many similarities as there are, there's also like 3 fundamental differences that are key and doom us from the start. And those are actually the pillars of my theory. The first being, well, first I have to tell you like what we're working with. So imagine this. Go on a like imagination journey with me. I am painting a scene, and there's a waterfall, and the trees are like a luscious green, and they're like teeming with life and like so bushy and like so thick and luscious, and this waterfall is like cascading over these mountains, and the mist is peeling off the water and like sparkling in the like in the light with golden little flicks. And there's a swan that's like flying through it all. And then we go to paint it or draw it. And we sit down. And it doesn't work. In fact, we're gutted because a 5-year-old could have drawn better than what we have just drawn. And we're crushed because, like, we just envisioned it and we can't do it. So we put it away. We never do it again. And we just, like, shit on ourselves for being uncreative potatoes. It's the worst. It's the actual worst. It's horrible and embarrassing. And we never do it again. And I believe there's 3 components as to why we never pick it back up and why this happens in the first place. The first is that we have this incredible power of visualization. Now I say power because it can work for us and against us. Art, unlike sports, is a visual thing. Now, we think about it. We're like, man, I'm creating this amazing image in my brain. You think it all through like I just did. And logically, you should be able to create it again a second time. I mean, I've already done the hard bit. I've created the image. It's in my brain. Why doesn't it just come out? Because I've already done it once. You know, I just feel like I've let myself down because it worked the first time. Even though it was in my brain and not on paper. Like, it already happened. So I, like, let myself down and I'm disappointed. And, like, I think the reason this is because we don't think about this middle bit. The process. And I mean, we can't actually blame ourselves. We're so disconnected from the process. I mean, in the media when we watch the movies, artists aren't the ones who get, like, workout montages. We don't get to see them rise from, like, nothing to greatness. We see the boxers, like, you know, running up the stairs and shit, but we don't see artists working on their colors or, like, exercising their lines and paintbrushes. In fact, when we go to museums, which is, like, you know, the place where we get half our artistic knowledge, everything's already finished. Very rarely do museums have, like, a work-in-progress painting. These people have been at their prime and peak for hundreds of years. So, like, it's no wonder we can't make that connection. Like, everywhere around us, art just exists. The second thing that dooms us, you know, still in my personal opinion, is that art is a solitary thing versus sports are a sociable experience. No, not always, but most of the time. And this, at first, seems like a really fucking cool thing because teams can be complex, there can be arguing, there can be disagreements, and when we're on our own, we don't have to worry about other people's problems. They're, like, over there, we make our own decisions. It's easy breezy. We just kind of go with what we like. But then, if we mess up on our waterfall, it's not so great, because although that complexity was there, it also allows for a lot of different avenues for those teams to lift each other back up and veer each other back on track. Versus us solo artists, we have now become disappointed and dug ourselves into a hole. And that's hard because even when we're not alone, even when we have a teacher or, like, a mentor, usually that goes one of two ways. Either the mentor is, like, super overbearing and they're like, I'm gonna help you, takes over your entire project. And then you're like, this isn't even mine anymore. Or you get the super aloof teacher who's like, you're just trying to ask a question and they're so gung-ho about, like, you having your own experience that they refuse to, like, offer any actual help, and they're just, like, vague as anything. You'll be like, how do I mix this color? And they'll be like, do what you feel. Let it speak to you. You're the learning master, you know, like. And on top of that, art is such a personal experience that it can be so hard to even think about asking for help. You know, because you have to let them into that vulnerability. And on top of that, our society has this notion that, like, you have to be this, like, wounded lone wolf, and without suffering, you have nothing to make art about. And the muse of creativity will never visit you unless you're, like, in a bad place. Which isn't true, it's just bad mental health. But, like, we buy into that. So we stay stuck in our holes. My third bit is a little bit more abstract. And that is that in sports, we are a part of a whole experience. But in art, that whole experience is a part of us. Now, what I mean by that is that in sports, you go into the field, you go into the stadium, you have other people, other conditions that you cannot control around you. There's so many moving parts that if something goes wrong, you can't take it personally. Because there's so many other things to take the blame with you, or that you can blame it on, or, like, that just affects how you're performing. So, with art, though, that whole experience feels like it comes from a piece of us. And that makes it particularly difficult because it feels personal, and we beat ourselves up more. We're always on the outside pulling this experience from within us. And so we feel like we're supposed to be in complete control and ownership of this thing. And then, like, I decide when I put it on paper, I decide my intent, how I'm gonna do it, I decide, like, everything. So when I fuck up, it feels like it's all on me. It feels like because of my decisions, it's bad. And then because it comes from that piece of us, we're like, wow, that piece of us is bad, so I'm bad. And we just let it fester. So we're, like, disappointed in a hole, and then we let it fester. So it's no wonder we quit on ourselves. There's so much working against us. Okay. Now, how do we come back from this? Well, let's revisit those things, but take a look at it from a little bit more of a sporty lens, right? So, that power of visualization. Let's imagine now instead that we're like a little 10-year-old, like, baseball player. And so, using that same power, he's like, or she, they, this player is like, oh my god, I'm gonna hit that ball so hard, it's gonna, like, knock out the park, and then I'm gonna run so fast, and I'm gonna make a home run, and it's gonna be amazing. And then they do it. And the ball only goes, and they run, but their little legs don't run very far. And they're disappointed because their abilities don't match their expectations, just like us. What do? Well, in this case, we gotta think about, like, every movie ever made. So there's always that kid who's like, I love this thing, but I suck so much. What do? I'm gonna find my hero. They're gonna make me good at this. And then they meet their hero and they're in for, like, a reality check, right? But the hero ends up explaining, hey, I am like this now because I did these things when I was where you were. And so they kind of bridge that gap between, like, our expectation and then our goal. And, you know, they kind of break down, like, okay, these are the steps I took. If you at least do these, you'll be higher than you were. And so what can we do as artists to, like, steal some of that? Well, Is there an artist or a piece that inspires you? Is there someone you look up to that you could like ask about their process and kind of like fill in that gap for yourself, make that connection? Can you just learn more about what is involved to meet your goal? You know, what are all the steps in between? We're gonna call that solution "Hear It From a Hero." Thank you. Okay, so at this point, maybe we're a little bit less disappointed about our waterfall because our hero has now broken it down and said, yeah, my waterfalls used to look bad too. And then I did all these things, and that's why they look so great. And we're like, wow, I believe you. I look up to you. You inspire me. What next? Well, we still have to dig ourselves out of a hole that we're alone in. So how do we create teams? Well, one way you could do it is either to actually find people to support you. This can be really helpful, like if you have a fellow artist that you maybe go to whenever you're like down in the dumps. Or I like going to this like community group and just doing like a little show and tell where like this is what I'm working on. They're like, ooh, ah, and, you know, we talk about it together. That can be really refreshing and kind of like pull you out of your own perspective. But let's say you prefer the solitude and you want to stick with that. Totally fine. I've got a sweet little trick for you that I stole from my support group. So thank you, Dr. V. Which is to cultivate a coach within yourself. So what you do is like pretend that you are two different beings. One of you is very like wounded and upset and like raw, and the other side of you is like nurturing and empathetic and compassionate and like wants to take care of you. So what you actually do is get out a piece of paper or your phone or something like that, and whenever you're upset as your wounded artist, just vent and properly write down and say like, I suck, I hate this is the worst. You know, release everything. And then later, when you're composed, when you're ready to like try again, you pretend that you are a coach, or you pretend that you are somebody who could like give this person like good advice. And so after you've entered your coach persona, you just give them like very real advice and you write back. And it doesn't have to be anything like crazy. Like, not everybody believes that they're amazing. You don't have to put that you're amazing. But something that real but kind. So like even something that's as simple as like, keep at it. This is only your first week. The second week will be easier. Like, that's believable. That's still kind. And that can be like a silly but really valuable way to develop that like voice so that you don't end up in a hole in the first place. We call that talk to a coach. Okay, now we've dug ourselves out of a hole. We're a bit less disappointed. How do we stop ourselves from taking it personally? Well, in sports, when teams are super sucking, what do the commentators say? Do they actually make personal attacks on the team members and say like, so-and-so is absolute garbage and should never have started this from the beginning? No. They say something more like, so-and-so shouldn't have made that decision. It's not looking too good for them. They're having a bad season and they missed their opportunity. They might sound both bad, but actually there's a difference there. One is attacking things they cannot change. One is attacking things they can. And so my recommendation for this is to start separating ourselves as humans from artworks, because they might be a part of us, but they are also their own. And even though that might be based on our experience is actually ours to keep in here. And this thing is just a thing with an idea of our experience, a copy, something that relates to it, but it's ours to give, and this one's ours to keep. And so you might be thinking, Roxy, but my work's like my baby. And I'll say, okay, let's roll with that. Let me just jump ships on my analogy and say, your work is your baby. Let's roll with that. Now, if someone said something ugly to your baby, would you take it personally? I don't think so. Let's say that somebody called your baby ugly. Your baby is a baby. It is none the wiser. That is like just a comment to it. It doesn't care. It's your project. It doesn't care. It doesn't have a voice. You, on the other hand, would be like confused, observant, maybe wonder what your baby did to like warrant this response, but you would definitely not feel attacked for your baby. You would just be perplexed. People can comment on the work, relate to it, critique it, but at the end of the day, that's not your relationship. That's their and the baby's relationship. So let's say somebody says something nice to your baby in response to something your baby said. You might feel good, you might feel nice, you might be like, that's cool. But at the end of the day, they have commented on your baby has impacted them. That is their relationship, that is not yours. Let's say somebody says something ugly to your baby, like, ew, the person who made this is like garbage and shouldn't do it again. Like, that's rude. That is a very poorly communicated response, but like what they're really saying is this person's interpretation of this thing has led them to believe that there was poor craftsmanship involved. Now, it is up to you later as a separate entity to decide if you're interested in intervening or if you're interested in like taking that information and using it. This one's the most difficult and abstract because there's no like easy way to separate. But at the end of the day, it's like your decision whether you want to take someone's advice or comments, and your decision whether you feel like finding out why they're stirred up. But isn't it interesting that work we make can stir somebody into like making comments? I mean, if you're really getting a lot of flack, or like, let's say you're having a shit day and everybody's like, I hate your work. I hope not. I hope people aren't dicks to you, or I hope your work isn't like that provoking. But a helpful way to reframe that might be not that you are shit, but that they are responding to your work. Now, what is it about your work that is causing them to respond in such a powerful way? Do you want to explore that? That gets to be your decision. So, my last and most vague point is separate your identity from that of the project. And as my final words, you're gonna be clumsy. Like, you're gonna make art that sucks because you haven't done it before. Or if you have, you should expect to fall on your ass because that's how we get better. And it sucks. It so sucks. But like, I really hope that at least knowing some of the things that are in play as we learn and grow will mentally help you to keep going. You don't have to do art. You don't have to be creative if you don't want to. But for those of us who do, I think it's so, so helpful to just know where it comes from so we can like get it and like know that it's not just us sucking, So I hope that this video is helpful to you. I hope that you continue doing art. And I hope that you at least enjoyed my, like, theory. I think it's a pretty good one. I don't know about you. But thanks for watching my first YouTube video. See you around. Bye.